We're going to talk to you about how you can restore, season, dry, and properly store your cast iron cookware today. A lot of people love to use cast iron cookware because with a skillet, for example, you can not only cook on a stovetop with it or on a campfire, on a grill, but you can also bake with it in the oven. It has many purposes. And if you take care of your cast iron cookware properly, it can last you a lifetime. There are a lot of myths about using cast iron cookware. We're going to dispel some of those up front here. As you can see, I've laid out what we're going to need for both the restoration process, which this doesn't need because this is a new pot, but it's similar to how you would season it anyway as far as the steps go. So we're going to talk about that while we show you how to season the pot. But you'll see that there's soap here. One of the myths about cast iron cookware is that you should never use soap with cast iron. That's not true. A lot of folks attribute rusting to having been caused by soap. That's not true. That's because the cast iron cookware was not properly dried after it was cleaned or after it was seasoned. And it was stored wet, and so rust developed. But to restore or to season your cast iron cookware, all you need is mild soap. You'll need a Brillo pad, and if you have one of the Brillo pads that has soap built into it, then you don't need your mild soap. But this is a normal Brillo pad, so I need soap. You need some sort of oil for the seasoning. Here's where a lot of myths come in also. There's talk out there that flaxseed oil is the absolute best. Some people use corn oil. This is vegetable oil. Some people even use bacon grease. And you can find videos on YouTube where they say you should use some sort of a more a solid shortener like Crisco and grease it in with paper towels. You'll also need paper towels also. That's all you need. But now, who's right when it comes to oil? Which oil is best? They're all usable. They're all good. A lot of the myths and a lot of the stories with cast iron, it's not that it's folklore as much as it is family tradition. If somebody from work told you that you've got to use vegetable oil or corn oil to season your cast iron skillet, that's because more than likely that's how it's been done in their family for generations. But any of the oils I mentioned will work. And so with no further ado, we're going to get right into showing you how to do this. All right, guys, so here we are. We're in the sink, and you want to use hot water, not so hot that you burn yourself. Remember, you've always got to be safe. But now we are seasoning a pan or a skillet, a cast iron skillet that we recently just bought. But now what I'm doing here, this would also be the first step in restoration. Let's say you've got an old cast iron skillet, found one at a yard sale, or the one you had in storage had rusted and you didn't realize. This is how you would start that also. Okay, so we get it nice and wet, and we're going to use our mild soap. Again, it's a myth that you cannot use soap. And then we use a Brillo pad. And we simply build up a nice lather, and we use a little more soap than that. But you want to scrub it really, really well on every crook and cranny of the pan. Okay, not, oops, of the skillet. You want to make sure to get the edges, the seam. Make sure you're getting the top part of the edge and all the way around. Now look, you want to also get the handle, because the entire thing is one solid piece of cast iron. That's why it's called that. You want to get this particular pan has another handle here to make it easier to get in and out of ovens. We also have a wood stove. We have cooked with other pans in the past and pots on our wood stove in the winter when the power's gone out. Okay, now flip it over once you've done the front. I'm going to get my hot water going again. It's recommended not to use cold water. I can't verify whether or not that's one of those myths or family traditions or urban legends, but I just always use hot anyway. Now we're going to do the same thing on the back. Got the bottom, I'm going to get the sides. Going to get both handles. All right, and then I'm going to rinse again with hot water. You want to make sure to get all of the soap off. Soap off the handle. And I'm going to make sure I got all the soap out of the front part as well. I'm going to make sure the soap is off of all of the, or both of the handles. Again, flip it back to the back. I don't want to have any soap on here. Alright, so now all of our soap is rinsed. So now we're going to thoroughly dry this with a towel. Okay, now guys, here is where a lot of people start making their mistakes. They do not dry these things well enough before. Now this is in regard to storing them. Like a lot of people would let it air dry. You don't let these air dry. You dry them off with a towel, and then you actually put them on a little bit of heat on your stove so that the heat can dry any excess water that might be stuck in this very uneven textured portion of the skillet here. So this looks like it's dry with the towel, but just to make sure, I'm going to put on a little bit of heat on the stove too for maybe 1 minute. Okay guys, I've dried my cast iron skillet with the towel, but now I'm also going to put it on a burner on low heat for about a minute or two to make sure that any excess moisture that the towel didn't get, because again, the surface down here is not even. There's little divots in there. I'm going to let that cook off. So I'm going to give it about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and then I'm going to turn off the heat and I'm going to let that sit there for a couple of minutes before I go on with the next step, because of course I don't want to burn myself. Okay, so we've soaked it out, scrubbed it down, dried it with a towel, cooked any residual water off with a little bit of heat on the stovetop, and now we're going to start seasoning it, okay? And again, I'm using vegetable oil. You can use corn oil, you can use flaxseed oil, you can use Crisco, and some people even do this part with bacon grease. But what I'm going to try to do is, you know, I can always add more oil, but I can't, well, I mean, I can take some away too if I just suck it up with a paper towel, but I'm trying not to use too much. I want to make sure to use enough to get a good coating. The bottom's coated. I want to use the sides. Now guys, a lot of folks will season their cast iron cookware once a year, every other year, depending upon how much they use it. It's not necessary, but the entire purpose for this is, now here's where we're going to get a little bit technical. This is a big word. It's called polymerization. It's a chemical process that takes place where this oil will actually go through a chemical combination process and become part of the pan. And the more you do this, or the more you cook with your cast iron skillet, now remember, turn it over because we're getting the back side also, and I'm going to add a little bit more oil. But as you cook food, be it the fats coming out from your beef or your pork or your chicken, or the grease from your bacon, that adds to that polymerization process and continues to become part of the bottom of the pan. That's why over time food will stick less and less the more you use your cast iron skillet or your cast iron pot, whatever cast iron cookware you're using. Again, get the handles. You want to make sure to get the handles. You want to make sure this thing is nice and greasy. Every crook and cranny is covered with oil. And now that it is, we're going to move on to the next process. And I've got my oven preheating right now at 350 degrees because we're now going to put this in the oven upside down, and we're going to bake it for at least 1 hour. And again, some people say 30 minutes, some people say an hour, some people say 3 hours. We're going to go with an hour. We're going to take it to the oven now and show you how we do that. Okay guys, my oven is still preheating. Before it started getting hot, I made sure to put some aluminum foil in here. I'm going to put my skillet in here upside down, and there's not a whole lot of oil on this, but some of it still may drip as it gets hot, so I put the aluminum foil here to try to catch that. So we're just going to shut this up, and we're going to leave it in here for 1 hour. After which, I'm not going to pull this out. After an hour, I'm going to turn the oven off, and I'm going to wait until the oven naturally cools down and cools off and all the heat dissipates. So I'm going to bake it for an hour, but I may actually be leaving this in here for 2 hours because that's part of the seasoning process. Bake it at 350 for an hour, turn the oven off, do not take it out until it naturally cools. So I'm going to come back in a couple of hours and show you how we finish it. Okay guys, so we baked it at 350 for an hour, and then we let it cool in here for about 2 hours. So now we're moving on to the next step. We're almost done. Now we give it a proper smoking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply medium heat, and then I'm going to put enough oil in the pan or in the skillet to cover the entire bottom. Remember, I used that big scientific word earlier, polymerization, something like that, polymerization. What we're doing here, what the smoking does, is it will cook the fats from the oil down into the grooves of the uneven surface of the cast iron to make it even better cooking surface for future uses. And one of the benefits of cast iron is it's one of those products that the more you use it, the better it gets. So we've got our oil on there. It's about 1/2 inch deep. We're going to leave it on the heat until it starts smoking. This should take about 5 to 7 minutes. Okay guys, I've had this on the heat actually for about 10 minutes and it's smoking really good now. I hope you can see it through the phone. I'm trying to hold this thing at an angle. It's kind of hard because it's black on black back there. But it's smoking really, really well right now. Hopefully you can see the smoke. It's there. And it's coming up pretty good. So now that it's smoking really good, I'm going to turn off the heat. And now we need to let it cool. Can you see that smoke coming up? Oh yeah, you can get a good shot of it there. Good view. Now guys, this is super hot. If you're using an electric stove, when you turn off your heat, you know your stove top's going to stay hot for a while, so you can move it to another burner. But since I have a gas stove, I can just let it sit here on that burner until it cools down. So we're going to let it cool so we can drain the oil, and I'm going to show you the final step in seasoning your cast iron skillet. Alright, so our cast iron skillet has cooled on our stove top for about 30 minutes. I'm going to show you the last stage of the seasoning process. You just drain the oil that you heated to a smoke. Get it out of there as much as you can. And of course there's going to be a light coating of oil that remains in the skillet. And you want that because that's going to be part of the, well, it's going to be the last part of the seasoning process. After you've drained it out really well, take a paper towel, might have to take a couple, and you wipe the rest out. Like this. Wipe it all the way around. And you're wiping it in there really good. Look at that. I think that pretty, you know, I'm going to use just one more. You don't want to actually wipe all of it out. There's going to be a thin layer that remains, but I don't want it to be a greasy, thick layer that remains. So that is pretty much it. And from here, I'm simply going to stick it up on the shelf to store it. Now, again, after I use it, to wash it, I'm going to use hot water, and you can use mild soap. It's a myth that you cannot. But if you want to just be on the safe side, if for some reason it's stuck in your head that you're not supposed to use soap, wash it out with hot water really well with your hands. Dry it off with the towel, like we showed you in the first part of the video, and then put it on the stove and heat it for a minute or two to make sure that it's completely dry before you store it. If you have a cover for your cast iron skillet, don't cover it just in case there is a little bit of moisture left in the skillet, because that will cause rusting. That's all there is to it. Now, we've given this a thorough seasoning going forward. The more we use it, the better it'll get. We hope you enjoyed this video. We hope you learned something from it. If you did, please consider subscribing to our channel, Homesteading Off the Grid, and we'll see you next time for more.